Greetings and salutations, friends and gamers of all stripes. My name is GM Dave, I am your man behind the screen, and welcome to the third and final installment of our character showcase on Joshua Graham. In the previous installments, we took a deep dive into the character of Joshua Graham, looking at his history, his personality, his faith, and the different motivations that he has that drove him to be the zealot that he is. Now it's time for us to take those elements and start breaking them apart, to see what specific traits we can take from Joshua Graham when hoping to create zealotry-driven characters of our own that will not only make them interesting and engaging, but leave them with the potential to grow that he had. So without any further ado, let's have a look. Now, before we begin breaking down the different elements that make Joshua Graham so interesting, we first have to define what a zealot actually is. And to keep the definition simple, we're just going to say that a zealot is any person who will use their ideology or their faith to justify extreme action in the name of that ideology or faith. Now, that does raise a question for us. The world Joshua Graham lives in is inherently extreme. The Fallout universe is post-apocalyptic. It is filled with monsters and bands of roving raiders and tribals who fight and kill on a day-to-day basis. So considering the fact that this is such an extreme universe, can we actually call Joshua Graham a zealot? Well, yes, we can. Because we can see that the extremeness of his own actions is not mirrored by the people around him, save, of course, for the White Leg tribe. The best example of this is his fellow New Canaanite Daniel. Daniel, while willing to fight, makes it very clear that he is a pacifist. He strives for peace above all else, and his goal is to avoid fighting with the White Legs. He, unlike Joshua, actually wants to flee Zion Canyon to preserve the innocence of the Sorrows tribe and to hopefully prevent an all-out war from breaking out. He's willing to sacrifice this holy land in order to keep people safe. Compare that to Joshua Graham, whose goal right from the start is the eradication of the White Legs. And we can see, without a doubt, Joshua Graham is absolutely a zealot. Not because he wants to eradicate the White Legs. His desire to do that is actually fairly reasonable given the world he is in, especially when we consider the fact that the White Legs want to eradicate him and Daniel as well as the Dead Horses and Sorrows tribes. What it is that makes Graham a zealot is how he justifies this. Recall, when he is going into battle, he gives plenty of religious quotes and pulls from his faith many times in order to justify the actions that he is taking. Now, whether or not he did the same thing while in Caesar's service, we don't know. We've never seen Joshua when he was in Caesar's service. We don't know what it actually was about being around Caesar that drove Joshua Graham to start becoming the more violent person he is and to eventually become the first legate. We're never shown that in game, and so we don't really know how much his faith came into play there. But we do know that Joshua Graham's faith was in the back of his mind during that time, given the fact that he mentions that everything that he did, every action he took, was many tiny steps toward a grand fall. But whether or not his faith was prevalent in his life at that point really doesn't matter. What matters is the fact that he uses it to justify his actions now. And his actions grow more and more extreme as the DLC draws on, up to the point where he has that final confrontation with Salt Upon Wounds. If you reach that point in game with Joshua Graham where you're attacking the White Legs and you find Joshua Graham in the canyon with Salt Upon Wounds on his knees executing other White Legs in front of him, we can see that he is taking this to a level that is pretty extreme given the situation. Salt Upon Wounds is a butcher and a murderer, absolutely. However, he has been completely and utterly defeated here. His forces have been routed or killed, and there is no fight left in the White Legs at this point. Yet Graham stands perfectly ready to execute him nonetheless. An execution which you could argue is justifiable, but the fact that he's trying to use his faith as the basis for that execution, to use the wrath of God and make it his own, as he says, well, that just shows that it's his faith driving him here. It's in the name of his faith that he's doing this, even though, as we discover, it's really not because of his faith. And that's a common line among zealots. They will use their faith, use their ideology as an excuse to commit horrible, heinous acts. They will use these things to do the things that they want to do, and then put the blame for it, so to speak, on their faith and ideology. They will try to justify everything they're doing, write it off. So when you're making a zealot, players and GMs, consider what it is that's going to drive them. What is this ideology that pushes them so far? or rather, this ideology that they may be warping to push themselves even further into the extreme. Consider this for a moment. The ideologies themselves need not be extreme. It needs only be the way the zealot takes it. The core ideology of PETA, for example, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, really is not extreme. The idea of it is that you're supposed to treat animals with respect, treat them well, be kind to them. But PETA takes it to a far-flung level. They will murder animals simply because that they view that death is better than being in the hands of human caretakers. They will attack people. They will attack property and commit all kinds of property crime and violent crime. And they will say that it's okay because it's all in the name of protecting animals. The core idea that backs their ideology isn't extreme in and of itself, but the way they take it is. That is a common thing among all zealots, and that is something that you need to consider when making a zealotry-driven character. However, more than this, one has to consider just how far this particular zealot will go. Not everyone is going to be as extreme as Joshua Graham. Not everyone's going to be as extreme as PETA. Not everyone's going to be as extreme as ISIS. You can be a zealot and not necessarily be a violent extremist. So consider how heavily that is going to affect your character's life. Furthermore, we need this zealot to grow. The goal here is to create an interesting character that can grow from the bounds that they're in. So consider, how do you want your character to grow? In the case of Joshua Graham, he starts out as a zealot already. He has his faith, he has his beliefs, his experiences have set that in stone in the past, before the game, and what we experience is his potential to change from a zealot into something else, or turn away from that possibility of change. However, as players and GMs making NPCs, you have a choice. You don't have to start as a zealot. You can play someone who becomes a zealot. So you have to consider, what is it around you? What is it that's happening in your games? What is it that's happening with the other characters that might drive you to become a zealot if that's the route you want to take? What actions would your character find so unconscionable that they would begin getting pushed further and further down a dark path towards extremism and zealotry? Or, if you are starting as a zealot already, like with Joshua Graham, consider what actions that the characters around you can take that might begin to change your mind, that might begin to push you away from that might begin to help you realize that what your character is doing is not actually in the name of their faith, but rather using the name of their faith or their ideology to justify the actions they personally want to take. Consider for a moment what it is that Joshua Graham says if we do convince him not to kill salt upon wounds.
I want to take from them what they took from me, from my family. In this life, I want them to suffer. I want all of them to die in fear and pain. I want to have my revenge against him, against Caesar. I want to call it my own, to make my anger God's anger, to justify the things I've done. Sometimes I tell myself that these wildfires never stop burning, but I'm the one who starts them, not God, not them. I can always see it in my mind, the warmth and the heat. It will always be a part of me, but not today.
As you can hear from this quote, Graham begins to realize with your intervention that what he's doing is not the will of his God. It's not the will of his faith. He is turning right back down the kind of path he followed when he was with Caesar, but this time, instead of doing it in the name of Caesar, he's doing it in the name of his God. He's doing it in the name of his religion. And that's every bit as unhealthy. By realizing this, Graham is given the ability to change, and for the first time in a long time, realize that he has the chance to find a peaceful solution. His rage is tempered a bit, and he is willing to let Salt Upon Wounds go with the knowledge that even though the leader lives, he is wholly defeated. The Whitelegs will not come back for them. They have lost. They have been broken. He did not need to kill Salt Upon Wounds. The war was over. He'd already won. But if he had killed Salt Upon Wounds, he would have gone right back down that same dark path he traveled with Caesar. So consider for a moment what kind of actions the player characters around you can take that may either pull you away from your zealous actions or push you more towards them. Looking at these aspects, looking at how the people in your party can affect your character's growth is an important way to help them grow. Consider the fact too that the character doesn't actually have to grow to be engaging. Remember, the ending that I showed in the previous video was only the good ending of the DLC. There are many others, and there are a multitude of endings where Joshua Graham does not change his ways, and things turn out for the worse. So remember that your character doesn't actually have to change. They just need to show the potential to. Joshua Graham shows the potential to change in the game, even if he doesn't, by allowing the chance for you to talk to him before the fight begins. He doesn't just outright kill Salt Upon Wounds, he tries to milk the moment, and when you show up, he doesn't end things quickly, he gives you a chance to speak. That fact alone shows that he is willing and able to grow. The fact that he's been willing to speak to you and listen to you throughout the entire DLC, when he has been pushing constantly to end this fight, to begin this war and just kill off the Whitelegs so that they can survive, shows that he has the ability and willingness to change if you can draw it out of him. So consider what it is about the other PCs that might get your character to change, or at least consider changing, as well as the events that take place in the world around you that might push you either further away from or further down the Zealots' path. And just like that, friends and gamers, we have broken down some of the core elements that made Joshua Graham an interesting character. We can see some of the things that we can draw from to make Zealots interesting in and of themselves for our own characters. Zealots are driven by their ideology, or at least they use their ideology in their favor. They have deep wants and desires that they will use their ideology to justify striving for, even if those desires are dangerous to them and the people around them. They have the ability to change if they are willing to, or they have the ability to worsen if the influence of the people around them enables them to do so. And lastly, we just want to make sure we give our characters the option to change and that we show that about them, so that way they feel like more complete, rounded people, even if they don't manage to do so. And with all of that said and done, friends and gamers of all stripes, we have reached the end of this video and the end of our look at Joshua Graham. Stay tuned after this for a preview of the next character that we'll be putting into our system showcase. And in the meantime, if you liked this video, please feel free to leave it a like. Leave a comment down below if you'd like to contribute to the conversation. What ideas do you have about Zealots? Tell me what you're thinking in the comments down below, because I'd love to know it. Subscribe if you want to see more of my videos. Hit the bell notification icon for notifications. And make sure to follow me on social media for notifications as well. Minds in particular is probably the best way to follow me, especially if you want to get into direct contact with me. I use Minds far more than any other social media platform, except for, of course, YouTube itself. So with all of that said and done, dear friends and gamers of all stripes, as usual, I am GM Dave. I am your man behind the screen, and it is my sincere hope that you continue to roll high, role play well, and game on. And enjoy the preview of what is to come in our next character showcase.